Thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm Dervla McTiernan. Yes, I live in Australia, but the accent is Irish, so in case there's any confusion. Melanie has introduced you so thoroughly, Don, I'm going to skip my whole beginning and get right into the questions.
Uh-oh, all right. Yeah.
No tricky ones. You're on a 32-city tour, I understand.
Yes.
How are you feeling?
Like I'm on a 32-city tour.
Yeah. I saw you mention on Twitter the other day, this is your last tour. Was that a tired moment, or did you mean it?
I meant it. I'm retiring.
Yeah. This is it.
This is it.
Okay, well, it's sad news, but it makes being here tonight, I'm more grateful for it. I'd like to go back to the beginning briefly and ask you what you studied in university.
I studied African history and military history. I have a BA in African history and an MA in military history, which makes you a hardcore unemployable, Dervla.
So the BA in African history presumably eventually led you to your safari guide job. Or that interested?
It did, yeah. I was supposed to go into the State Department as an expert on African military affairs, which I did very briefly, but it was during the Reagan administration. I kind of didn't like it. A buddy of mine had a little photographic safari company that had grown where he needed a number 2. I spoke the languages and had enough of bush skills to, bring 8 people out and bring 8 people back, which is a requirement.
Yes.
They actually have to be the same 8 people, though. You can't sub any in or out. So, yeah.
And they frown it if you lose people, presumably.
Yeah, that goes on your record.
So at some point you felt your education was lacking and you turned to the study of literature. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, in the mid-90s, I guess it was, I realized how ignorant I really was. Because I had this very narrow education. I knew Shakespeare pretty well because I made my living directing Shakespeare for a while. But other than that, I really was not grounded in literature. And so I grabbed one of those great books lists, the dozens of them, and said in this autodidactic sort of Jude the Obscure way, of course I didn't know Jude the Obscure at that point, that was, that I would read the whole thing, which took 7 years.
Oof, that's a commitment.
Yeah.
Of all of the books you read from that list, did any of them, do you feel, have a dubious claim to being there?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think Dante's Inferno is a piece of crap. I do. It's just hateful work of just, payback after payback. I don't like this guy. He's in the 8th circle of hell, Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to skip that one when I do my great reads list.
It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the inspiration for City on Fire.
Yeah.
It came to you because, I think, of a combination of things. Am I right in saying that? A real-life event, which I'm hoping you'll describe for us, or at least if you could describe for us the first scene in the book.
The first scene in the book, there's a guy, Danny Ryan, who's a protagonist, lying on the beach, and he watches this lovely woman come out of the water, come out of the ocean, and he realizes right away that nothing's going to be the same from then on. And
if I'm right in understanding this, it was when you were reading the Iliad as part of your great exploration of literature and the combination of those two ideas?
It was. Reading the Iliad and reading about Helen of Troy reminded me very much of an incident that had happened in New England a number of years ago, where Irish and Italians at that point were friends, the mob, and they got into an argument. One of the Irish guys, no offense, Dervla, got drunk and he accosted the girlfriend of one of the Italian guys.
Yeah.
10 years and 36 lives later, that war ended. And it reminded me of Troy.
Yeah.
Reminded me of the Trojan War and Helen of Troy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about these ancient stories that keeps us going back for more?
They're eternal. They speak to the eternal human condition. Be it hate or love or lust or trust or dishonor, fate, pride. They're also about power. The pretext for the Trojan War was this woman, Helen of Troy, but that was an excuse. It was, one set of people wanted something that the other set of people had. And that's true in mob wars as well. They're always about money or power, no matter what the incident is.
The excuse. It does always feel like that's the root of every conflict.
Yeah.
When you scrape a little bit deeper. Do you agree with the theory, this theory of narrative, that there are 7 great stories and we retell them again and again?
I do. I do.
So which one is this?
I don't know. You know, look, I looked at a lot of different works for this. You know, the Iliad, but also the Odyssey. Particularly the Aeneid, because this follows Danny's life is basically Aeneas, who's a minor player in the Iliad. Yeah. And Greek tragic dramas. You know, so I wanted to follow these people, particularly the women, after the events of Troy, you know, through the next couple of books.
Tell us a little bit more about Danny.
Danny is starts the book as a longshoreman and a fisherman, very blue-collar guy in this little New England town where I grew up in Rhode Island. He marries the daughter of the Irish mob boss. So he's the son-in-law, you know. He said, kind of accepted, kind of not accepted. And he feels, though, intense loyalty to that family. And so when this conflict breaks out, he's dragged into it out of this sense of loyalty.
And he mentioned he's not quite at the center of the events. He's just slightly to the side. Why did you choose his point of view from which to tell the story?
Yeah, you know, it would have made more sense maybe to tell the story through Hector's point of view or Achilles' point of view, you know. But I always like pointing the compass sort of true north and then kicking it a little bit. I think you're very much the same.
I like that.
Yeah, and so you got this guy who he's in it, but he's not of it. He has one foot in it, so he can do the action.
Yep.
He's right there, but another foot outside of it so that he can comment on it, you know?
The book is set in Rhode Island, which is where you grew up. I think your dad was a sailor, your mom was a librarian.
Yep.
What was family life like for you when you were young?
Yeah, I've said it before. My dad was a sailor who loved books. My mother was a librarian who loved a sailor.
What a perfect combination.
You know? And so my dad was one of the great raconteurs of all time, one of the great storytellers. And he used to get his Navy buddies over, and I would sit under the table, and they'd pretend to think I wasn't there. You know, I thought I was getting away with it. And I'd listen to these great stories of their adventures all around the world. The stories got better every year.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and with more and more beers, they got better. My mom was from New Orleans. They met during World War II, and my dad had malaria. She became a librarian in this little town, this fishing village, you know, where the expectations of us were not high.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you know, sort of a Bruce Springsteen kind of a town.
Yeah.
The factories had gone south, the fishing was playing out. My dad used to drive me to within about 500 yards of the fish processing plant. And he'd say, if you don't study, if you don't buckle down, because I was a bad student, you're going to spend your life shoveling fish guts in there.
Oh, wow.
You know,
that was motivating?
It was motivating.
Yeah.
You know, but there were always books around, and, you know, I look at this sort of book banning thing that's going on here right now. My sister and I were allowed to read any book we wanted at any age. There was no censorship at all. If you had a book, you were good. And we both turned out to be professional novelists.
Really? Your sister's a writer also?
My sister published, I want to say, 44 romance novels.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, with these guys, actually.
Okay, well, I know what I'm reading next week.
There you go. I'll get you some.
Please, that would be great.
So, yeah, so growing up, stories were kind of sacred, and the word was kind of sacred. You know?
Wonderful. So coming back to Danny for a second, you mentioned by marriage he's part of this Irish-American criminal organization, which from the very beginning of the book feels like it's hanging on by a thread.
Yeah.
So the Irish-Americans control the docks. There's a rival group of Italian-Americans who control the trucking and the loan sharking and a bit of protection racket, and it's very violent. To what degree was that sort of backdrop drawn from real life?
Oh, 100%. That's what I grew up around, you know.
How did that impact you? I mean, I know it was a one step removed. You weren't part of the mob that we know of. Is this confession time?
Could be. I had one job with the mob.
Really?
Yeah. As a teenager. This is a mistake.
Should we backtrack?
No. Rhode Island in those days was a dry state on Sundays.
Okay.
So those people improvident enough not to allow themselves, you know, a supply for Sunday, would call one of the local package stores, I won't name it, it's still there, And my job, I would drive my little Chevy Nova to the back of the store on Sunday mornings and pick up the booze and then deliver it to, their customers for tips and things.
And you knew you were working for slightly shaky people at the time?
Well, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we all have to do what we've got to do. All right, so going back to the book for a moment. Liam Murphy.
Yeah.
It all kicks off when Liam Murphy, who's Danny's brother-in-law, grabs the breast of Pam Davies at a party. He's drunk.
Yeah.
He's obnoxious. And he's just generally a pretty awful guy. Spoiled, he's self-indulgent, very destructive. But Danny is pretty morally compromised as well.
Yeah.
So does this book have a hero, and does a book need to have a hero?
I don't know that a book needs to have a hero. I think this book does. In the classic literary sense, it has a hero, and that's Danny. And he has a classically literary tragic flaw, which is this loyalty.
Yes.
There's several times in the story where he has a chance to get out. And I think page 2, he's talking about leaving. But he never does because he feels loyal to these people.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to the theme of loyalty, definitely.
Okay.
But in relation to Pam, she is a very beautiful woman, and it's not a spoiler to say that she's a catalyst for destruction. This idea of a woman as destructive, the belle dame sans mercy, it recurs and recurs. Why do you think it is such an appealing idea to us as part of a story?
I think you're quite right. I mean, it's a major part of crime fiction, isn't it? But I wasn't really interested in that. Okay, I was interested in Helen of Troy. And it was funny because I didn't know what she was before she was Helen of Troy. And I felt it was important to give this woman a backstory, you know what I mean, so that she wasn't just a symbol.
Yes.
Right.
Which you very much do. She's very much a real person on the page. You know her.
Yeah, thank you. So I had to go back to mythology. I did quite a bit of research to try to find out who was Helen of Troy before that moment.
What did you discover?
Oh, I listen. I mean, I found out all kinds of things. That as a young teenager, she had this boyfriend that she was in love with, and they ran off together.
Oh my God.
And her parents sent her brothers to kill the guy, and separated them, and that's kind of what made Helen of Troy, the sort of cold person.
Yes, that she became.
And so I was trying to find what would the modern equivalence of that story be, and so there are scenes in the book where we go back to her.
Yes.
She's 16 years old at Miss Porter's school in Farmington, Connecticut, and follow that story. And that when she starts dating this Italian mobster, she does it to infuriate her parents.
Family.
Yeah.
And she makes decisions later on too that we won't give those away.
All right.
I'd like to go back a little bit. I want to ask you again about your dad.
Yeah.
Because I've heard you speak before about a very important moment in your life. I think when you were drafted and how he responded to that. Could I ask you to share that story?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I came of age during Vietnam, and they had a lottery to, if you were drafted or not. My number was number 10, so I was going. And I came home from college that summer. My dad was a Marine during World War II, 18 years old on Guadalcanal. I don't know what he experienced, and we're sitting at the dining room table, but I thought of him as very much a hawk and certainly very much a patriot. And he said, you're not going. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm not having you die in that war. You're going to Canada. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm going to go join the Marines, and he said, well, they won't take you. I don't know if this is a story you're referring to.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, when you were 3 or 4, you were falling down a lot. And I took you to the Navy doctors, and they said you had 2 extra bones in your back, and that you'd probably be able to walk, but you'd never be able to run, you'd never be able to play sports or anything. I'm sitting there with my jaw open, and so is my mom. And he said, I never told you, or your mother, because I didn't want you growing up thinking you couldn't do things, and I didn't want her always being afraid. And I always thought, well, when you do sports, because I played hockey and, ice hockey and all that your back hurt.
Yeah.
That's what
just
it was.
Just what you do.
Yeah, and I do. I walk like a broken duck. because this foot kind of points out as if I'm some sort of ballet dancer, you know, and I swim better than I walk. But I think that's the story you're referring to.
It is the story. I love what your dad did in that moment.
Yeah.
Despite his own background, he put, you know, your
Yeah.
safety first. And I
Yeah.
thought it was just a beautiful example of loyalty,
Yeah.
which I think is, as we've mentioned, a theme that recurs again and again in your books. What does loyalty mean to you?
I think loyalty is one of the prime human virtues, you know. I grew up with it, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think it's one reason it took me 27 years to write this book,
Yeah.
because it took me a long time to confront the fact that I'd left that town and left those people and left those friends behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that.
And felt somewhat disloyal about it.
Yeah.
It was hard to confront that
Yeah.
in
And
a
come
lot
back
of
to
ways
it.
and come back to it, yeah.
But in the book, Stan, it feels like something we see as a band of brothers, where the loyalty is the key to who they are. But within that loyalty, there's something dark, because it fractures. In the Force, it fractures, and in this book, it's fracturing. Does that mean that you see a dark side to loyalty?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, I think life gets very real. You know, you can swear that brotherhood a lot, as we tend to do when we're adolescents and, you know, maybe young men. The world intrudes, you know, and the world sometimes makes you make choices, not betrayal versus loyalty, but loyalty versus loyalty.
Yeah.
Who are you going to be loyal to?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, in the Force, he had to decide, I'm going to be loyal to my fellow cops or loyal to my family.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, Danny faces somewhat the same kind of choice. So now what do you do? You know,
And who's worthy of that loyalty?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
has to come into it at some point.
yeah, because it's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I finished the book, I didn't know when I was reading it, but when I finished the book, I found out it was the first of 3.
Yeah.
And that the action's really going to move in the next one, right? Because is it Hollywood and then
Hollywood
Vegas?
and then Las Vegas.
Can you tell us a little bit about the next 2?
Yeah, sure. I don't think I'm giving the plot away. You know, if you know some of these classics, and you know that Aeneas is one of the losers of the Trojan War and has to leave, and then he gets washed up on the shores of Carthage. Yeah. Well, the line that propelled me to write these 3 books, the Queen of Carthage, with whom Danny falls in love, or with whom Aeneas falls in love,
Yeah.
asks him to tell her about his previous life, and he says the following words in the Aeneid. He says, "Sorrow, unspeakable sorrow, you ask me to bring to life once more, my queen." Because I found that so poignant, because here's this guy who'd lost virtually everything, but he has an elderly father to care for, he has an infant to care for, and he has some survivors, and he has to lead them to try to find a place in this world. So Aeneas is in Carthage, and he walks into a cave, and he sees murals of the Trojan War. He sees himself, he sees his friends, he sees his house. And it took me a couple of years to really figure out what would be the contemporary equivalent of that. And the answer is movies.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
perfect.
So he's out in Hollywood, and they're making a movie of what is basically the first book,
Yeah.
you know, of his life, and he falls in love with the woman who plays Pam.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh my
really.
God.
Yeah. And then in the Aeneid, you know, he has to found an empire. It's the founding myth of Rome.
Yeah.
Well, what's that in 1990s America? And what I came up with, it's Vegas, and it's casinos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the spread of it. I love that there's so much movement through it. I can't wait to read these books.
Yeah, I like the movement too, and I think it's also, you know, it's about America, because classically we go west, don't we? And we go west to reinvent ourselves. So you go to Hollywood, the land of dreams. You know, in fact, the book's called City of Dreams.
Ah, perfect.
You know, and then to sort of the ultimate fantasy town where you can sort of build anything, right?
Is Vegas.
It's Vegas.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. Don, you've announced your retirement from writing, which I'm very sad about, and I'm sure other people in the room are very sad about, because you're such a fabulous writer, and to think we won't have your writing is not a happy thought. What led you to the decision?
It's been evolving, you know, since about 2016. You could probably all do the math on that.
Yeah.
I've been sort of active on Twitter, on social media, and I've been doing the tweets, and my partner and co-conspirator Shane Salerno, we've been doing these videos, and I thought that we'd won.
Yeah.
And then the events of January 6th happened, and
Yeah.
other things have happened, and other things have not happened, and we're not out of the woods. So I've kind of come to the conclusion that we're at this existential moment in American democracy, maybe world democracy. And I just think it's time. This trilogy was sort of a homecoming,
Yes.
kind of a completion of the circle. It was time to devote whatever talents I have and what energy I have left to that fight.
Do you find it personally stressful, that work?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all stressed right now. I think we've been stressed for years. I think the utter chaos of the Trump administration, COVID, everything that's happened since, I think a lot of us, and I hear this a lot as I travel the country, doing this tour, that people are anxious and they're tired. I do find it worrisome, but the problem is, if you give in to pessimism or you give in to despair, then what do? Do you just lay down on the couch in a fetal position, throw a blanket over your head, and let neo-fascist thugs take over our country? I don't think so.
No.
So, yeah, I think you can feel down and you can feel worried, and you just need to keep putting one foot in front of the other anyway.
If Donald Trump had not become president, would you still be writing?
Wow, I hadn't thought of it that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know.
Okay.
We can't choose the times we live in.
No. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So the activism is something that you've chosen. Do you think other people who have a large personal profile should step forward and be more vocal?
Not necessarily. I'd like to see it. Listen, I think that the only responsibility a writer has is to write well.
Yes. Okay.
That's it. Beyond that, I think it's a matter of personal choice, and this is a choice I've made, but I wouldn't criticize anybody else for not doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. If you aren't going to write novels, could you be tempted to write something else?
No.
Not even for screen?
No.
No?
No. Listen, I've written a couple of screenplays.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm very good at it. Novels is what I do, or what what I did. But I think at least through 2024, I think I'll be writing tweets and videos.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to those too. You've been a very disciplined writer. I mean, your working day is hardcore. You're at it by 5:30, and you work longer hours than most writers do, I think.
Yeah.
Are you going to miss that discipline, or will you bring that to your activism?
I don't know yet. I finished the third book of this trilogy about a week before I came on the road to go on tour, and so I haven't had the experience yet of being retired. I don't know. I think it's going to be strange. If I start work at 5:30, it means I'm up at 4:30, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be odd to wake up and not think, I need those 10 pages today.
Yeah.
Or, and you're familiar with this, to have that plot problem.
Yep.
Like, how do I solve that? What am I going to do? And the other morning I woke up, in a hotel room, not quite knowing where I was, and thinking, oh, I don't have a plot problem to solve.
Yeah. I can send my brain somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't, I'm not telling this story. The story's being told. So, it's a little interesting.
Do you feel free? Do you have a list of things you want to do apart from your other work?
Well, the work on social media is
going to be the main thing.
Is the main thing. But yeah, look, I want to ride more waves.
Yeah.
I want to take longer hikes.
Yeah.
Jean and I, my wife and I, wanted to travel a little bit more that's not work related.
Yeah.
I want to spend more time with friends. I think one thing, and maybe you share this and everybody shares this, that I learned from COVID, from the pandemic, was how valuable those friendships are. You know, I've tended to neglect them because I've been so busy working. And then it was all taken away, you know, for the better part of 2 years. And now maybe it's starting to come back. And having had now a couple of dinners with friends and a little time, you know, I realized just how much I cherish, you know, those relationships.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Don 2 more questions, and then I'm going to throw it to you guys for the Q&A. So I hope you've thought of some really twisty ones. Don, anybody who
Dervla.
read your bio and didn't know you, just
Yeah.
read everything you've done, all the different jobs you've worked and all the choices you've made, I think would see you as someone who lives life very bravely with a lot of imagination. Did it feel that way as you've been doing it? Does it feel that way?
Look, I always wanted to do interesting things,
Yeah.
you know. Nobody, as you know, stamps your passport to be a writer.
No.
You know, I had to make a living for a lot of years, you know, before I could make a living doing this. And so that being the case, and really wanting to see the world, you know, which came out of growing up in that little library,
Yeah.
you know, I just wanted to make interesting choices. And fortunately, I married really well. You know, I've been married for 37 years,
Yeah.
you know, to the same woman, who's very adventurous, you know, was willing to go along for that ride. You know, so if, you know, we'd been married for a month and I got an offer to go direct Shakespeare at Oxford. You know, hey,
Of
babe,
all your jobs, that's my favorite one.
I loved that job. I love that job, you know, and so, hey, babe, do you want to come and we'll move to England and live in a college for the summer, and then we're going to Africa to chase leopards around with cameras, and
Sounds amazing.
then we'll go back to California where I'm doing cases, but you never knew how long one would last or not last. So we lived in hotels for 3 years,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes with a baby and then a toddler,
Oh, wow.
you know,
Yeah.
and loved it,
Yeah.
and loved it. So, you know, I've been so lucky,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so lucky.
It sounds amazing,
Yeah.
I have to say.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you were talking to a young writer, a new writer, we should say, because you can start writing at any age. If you're
Yeah.
talking to a new writer,
Yeah.
is there one piece of advice you'd give them?
Could I have 3?
You can have 3, yeah. I'll be generous.
You are very generous. Well, one would be write. I know that sounds glib, but writers write before it's a noun, it's a verb. Yeah. But alongside with that, I always try to say, do the doable.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people say, well, I'm going to write a book this year. No, you're not. Because you have lives. And I was 7 published books into my career before I could quit my day jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jobs plural,
Yeah.
right? Because you have a job, you have a family, you have friends, you have a spouse, you know, things intrude. And so what I always say is do the doable. Set a goal you can actually achieve, and then stick with that, right? So if that's, I set my goal at 5 pages a day, no matter what.
Awesome.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 3, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 1. But do the math. Write a page a day, and in a year, you've got a book,
Yeah.
right? So whatever you decide to set, stick to it, but set it where you can do it, because otherwise what happens is you fall behind, you don't do it, you get down on yourself,
Yeah.
you know, and you're setting yourself up for failure. And then the third and last piece of advice would be this. If you do that, if you set a goal and you stick to it and you wrestle with, I guess it's the empty screen now as opposed to the empty page, you are a writer. You are a writer. You're our colleague. And don't let anybody ever take that away from you.
Yeah.
And the person who's most likely to take it away from you is you. So that's what I would say.
I completely agree with that. Thank you, Don.
Thank
I
you,
would love to
Dervla.
throw it to you guys for questions. I'm not sure how we're doing. Are we doing, have we got a microphone? I think we've got a microphone.
Yeah,
back
so
there.
if you have a question, you can just raise your hand, hand high, and Campbell is going to come over with the microphone.
No one is allowed to be shy. Great, we've got one here and one here.
Thank you.
When you look back at your body of work, which one book do you think best exemplifies your style as a writer?
Probably this one.
Okay.
Well, listen, I think you evolve, you change, and hopefully you get better at your job.
Right.
You know, So if I had to say, you know, there was kind of, you know, it would be this trilogy, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There's a gentleman here at the front.
It's a question actually for either or both of you. What's your favorite crime to like write about, or whichever?
To write about. Murder. It's always murder. Go straight for the big one every time. Anything that makes, you know, you feel something, really. This is the honest answer. I'm always looking for a character first, someone I really care about, who interests me, because writing a book is a big endeavor. You need to be able to feel relatively confident that when you're 9 months in, you're still going to care. So it's more about the person I'm looking for, really, rather than the crime.
Yeah, I do want to answer your question, and it would probably be robbery, which I haven't written much about. I've written a few things. But something like Dervla, I'm much more interested in character than I am in the events or in the plots. Michael Connelly once said, in a conversation with Joe Wambaugh, he said he wasn't so interested in what cops do with crime, he was interested in what crime does to cops. I have a similar sort of feeling about criminals. I'm not so interested in what criminals do to crime, I'm interested in what crime does to criminals.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Anybody else?
Now that you've completed the last trilogy, is it resolved in any way your feelings of disloyalty of having left Rhode Island and your?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. You know, we went back there to take care of my mother, frankly. You know, I'd gone back for visits all the time, you know, but not for very long. And so my wife and I went back to take care of my mother in her declining years, and probably all know what that's about. And when staying longer and longer periods of time as necessity dictated, I fell in love with the place again. You know, I reconnected with some of the people, and became sort of part of the community again, I think. And I think that did resolve it. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Great question.
This is a political question. Oh, by the way, number 23 in the draft lottery, so that was a fun year.
It was a great year, yeah.
What? As I said, it's a political question. You touched on it just very briefly. Like, I'm very impressed and thankful that you're using your influence to not only fight, but you know, there's a lot of you know, rich liberals who are willing to help. But as far as I know, you're the only one who's actually talking about using your clout to get in their faces, which is, you know, the way it's breaking down the season is that it's the establishment Democrats saying, "Oh, let's be normal," and other people, including me, saying this is not normal. Have you reached out to other, shall we say, you know, people of your caliber to basically form this little army of people who will face off against these guys?
Yeah, a couple of times. You know, Mr. Springsteen helped us out with a video. The actor Jeff Daniels helped us out. We are in touch with a lot of people, you know, celebrities that want to help out, and also, but mostly working people. You know, so we're open to conversations with just about anybody and everybody. But I haven't sort of, you know, other than we asked, you know, Bruce Springsteen to let us use one of his songs in a video, and then Jeff narrated 2 of our videos just brilliantly. So yeah, we're reaching out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also have a somewhat political question. I'm actually more familiar with Dervla's work, but it's a question for both of you.
Ask Dervla a question.
Well, it's interesting because it's a question about America, and so I imagine that Dervla, your relationship to Anyway, so the question is, as someone who writes crime and detective and police novels, has your relationship to that changed as it has come to light and been part of the public conversation more in the past few years, particularly in America, the flaws of police in the United States and the ways that police don't keep many people in this country safe. And I was wondering if that has affected either of your writing at all.
Well, I'll go first if you don't mind. I can talk about it in the context of Irish policing, because my first 3 books were set in Ireland. This one is set in the US, but it is a little bit focused on policing. Look, I think I've always written it as I saw it. At one point, I wrote a plot in the 3rd novel, slight spoiler, but anyway, where the police were involved in taking seized drugs and reselling them. And they were taking backhanders from a particular drug gang. And that book had not come out, and my editor sent me a link to a newspaper article where that exact scenario was playing out in Ireland. You know, I think you can see things sometimes from the inside that are not anywhere close to policing, but you can just see what you see, and you write what you see to some degree. So I don't think I ever had an unrealistic view of how things are. And I think I've been fair, because some of my protagonists who I very much love are also police, so I'm showing both sides. I think it's about writing what is real as best you can. Would you say, Don?
Yeah, same answer. I've only written one sort of cop book called The Force about the NYPD, and I spent a lot of time with the NYPD, in researching that. But it's about a gang of dirty cops, So I think I was very frank about that. But I the same answer, really. I think that you need to be realistic and realize that this is very nuanced, that there's good and bad, there's a spectrum of this, and to really look at the individual.
Thank you.
You have an unmistakable, unbendable moral code. It's like steel in a spine. I'm curious if you know where it came from.
I don't know that I have a steel spine. Yeah, look, I think, and you can talk to this too. Growing up Irish Catholic, with the priests and the nuns and all that, you were taught there's right and there's wrong. And while now, with a bit of maturity, I tend to see the world perhaps more in shades of gray, I don't think that ever leaves you.
Yeah.
Dervla?
I don't know if I have that moral strength, but I will say that I agree with a lot of what you said. When I was my parents would very much have had, there's a right answer and a wrong answer, and they were really unequivocal on that, even when there was obviously something in between. And I think it really helped us growing up to have this. I didn't always agree with it, but it helped me to have this is a foundation to build on. I think these days the worry is that, and we know this because we know how human brains work, we think that what we do is we go out and we seek the knowledge and we analyze the knowledge and then we make a decision based on what we've learned. But actually the way our brains work, most of the time we just seek out things that confirm our existing biases. I think the problem with social media, which we kind of joke about, but the reality is it feeds that at a level we've never seen before, which is forcing people into camps, and it's keeping people uninformed. And I think it takes a little bit of something different to force yourself to have an open mind, force yourself to seek out actual facts. But if we don't do that, where are we going to end up? Because other people are manipulating the information flow. I just think that's unanswerable.
Yeah.
I think we all need to do that a bit more, maybe.
I agree with that, but let me also say we're right. I've looked at the facts. There was no child sex trafficking ring in the basement of a pizza restaurant that has no basement.
Yeah.
There wasn't.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Joe Biden won the election. He did. Yeah. People violently assaulted our Capitol trying to overturn the democratically elected government of the United States. they did. Those are facts.
Yeah.
And so I agree with Dervla that we need to seek the truth out and the facts out all the time, and that social media can be something of the devil, but I think I'm right.
Yeah, I agree. Not disagree.
Speaking of social media being the devil, has Elon Musk changed your relationship with Twitter? Oh, there's my mic.
Talking to me.
Yeah.
Not yet. Listen, the famous German military analyst von Clausewitz said famously that one should fight a battle on the ground of one's choosing. Well, that's great if you have that option, but you don't always. And so I think we need to fight the battle where the battle is. And right now that's on social media, including Twitter. So what I'm telling people to do is stay on Twitter, at least through the midterms, and then we'll see what happens, but keep fighting on Twitter.
Do you see parallels between Trump and Musk in some bizarre, weird way? Because I do with some of the things
Let me
he
see,
says.
you've used the names Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the words bizarre.
Yeah,
I think you answered your own question.
yes,
sir.
so yes.
Thank you.
I think we've got time for maybe one more question.
Hi, this question is for both of you. You've both written multiple novels. How do you think you hone your voice as a writer? What do you try to work on, focus on, and then let it naturally develop?
Well, I don't know if Don will agree with me on this one, but I think if you find your story by waiting until you care about something, and you really care about that thing as you write about it, your voice will come naturally. Because what makes a book is your point of view. You are the only one who can write your book. No one else can write that exact book, as long as you come to it honestly, with your real feelings and your emotions engaged. So I think that's what voice is, really. It's point of view. That's my view of it anyway.
I certainly agree. You know, I would never write a story that I wasn't in love with, you know, that I didn't care about passionately. In terms of my own work, I think I've become more efficient with words. I think that I won't use 8 words now if 7 will do. Maybe that's just being lazy.
And our last question is going to be from Zoom, from Kenneth, which is, why do you think the same problems that affected people in the time of the Aeneid are still fodder for modern fiction and relevant for modern audiences?
Did you understand?
Yeah, why do you think the same problems that affected people in the Iliad still affect people of modern audiences?
Because people are people. We haven't changed. You know, every theme that we deal with in my beloved crime genre, and I include you, and they'd already dealt with, you know, by the time the Greeks and Romans were done. It speaks to the eternal human condition.
Well, that's a perfect note to end on. Can I thank you very much, Don, for being with us tonight?
Can I thank you very much,
My
Dervla?
pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for coming.